Let's travel to 1857, 1858 roughly. Hello everybody, this is Shweta Jain from Kitabeclub and we are here for yet another interesting conversation on this book, Begum Hazrat Mahal by Malathi Ramchandran. By the time my author joins in, okay, let me just add my author, yes. Joins in, let me tell you something about her. She is a master's in mass communication and began her foray into fiction writing with writing several short stories, anthologies, and if I talk about full-blown book, she's written almost around 4 books. Hello, uh, good evening,
Sorry,
ma'am.
I'm just trying to change the
Yes,
this thing.
yes, yeah, ma'am. It's perfectly all right. Okay.
How do I change this around?
Ma'am,
Yeah, okay.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
here. It's here.
yeah.
Okay, okay.
Perfect. How are you, ma'am?
Hi, good evening. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good too. Before I introduce you, before I go any further, I owe this to you. I do owe this to your book. That for this particular year, I'm a vivid reader, but then for this particular year, I have at least shuffled around some 30, 35 books, but could not finish a single book. Like, cannot go beyond more than like 40, 50 pages. But then I have broken my fast, and I have broken my fast with this book. This is one book for the year 2023 which I have entirely finished and I enjoyed it. You know,
Thank you. Thank you so much. That means a lot. Thank you.
yes, and I have so much to talk to you, so much to ask you. But before we go further, like the ritual, like we do always, I'll introduce you. I'm sure the audience know about this because the moment I posted a creative about hosting you, there were several who recommended, oh, after this you read Mandu, after this you read this. I said, okay, let me just talk to you about this book. So kudos to you on that. It feels tremendous to host an author of your stature. So I'll quickly introduce you and then I go further and deep dive with you on Begum Hazrat Mahal. So Malathi
Sure.
Ramchandran ji is a master's in mass communication and began her foray into fiction writing with several short stories published in magazines and anthologies. Fascinated by India's rich past and the many human stories of love and loss beneath the larger narratives. Malathi endeavors in her novels not just to recreate history as it happened long, long ago, but also to explore the lives and relationships of those who lived during that era. She is author of 4 novels, the last two titles, The Legend of Kuldhara and Mandu 2020, and they are also in the genre of historical fiction. Welcome to Kitabeclub, ma'am.
Thank you so much for welcoming me here, and also for having me on this book discussion. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, my first question to you is, you have written about historical fiction. You have mostly written about strong female protagonists, and is there is there a liking towards it, or is that something you did out of fluke? Okay, that happened book by book for you.
Okay. So actually, when I say I write historical fiction and we talk of strong female protagonists, there is a slight oxymoron here because in those
Okay.
days, women were not feminists. They didn't get
Oh,
their way, they didn't live their lives as they chose to live. And yet I'm writing about women who lived 200, 300, 400, even 600 years
yeah,
back, as in my
yeah,
book Mandu, which is
yeah.
set in the 16th centuries. So at that point, there was no question of feminism. Women did not live their lives as they chose to. So when I about these female characters, the female protagonists, as being very, very modern in their thinking and very strong in their opinions, strong in their will, it is definitely what do you say? I would say it's a decision, a conscious decision that I have taken
Yes.
to make them such. And I
Okay.
can talk to you in detail about them at this point or later, but each of my female protagonists is a feminist in her own way.
True. When going through your narratives, I never felt that, okay, is she choosing between this or that? It was always like, okay, this is what she's meant to do. So I do understand the oxymoron you are referring to. At the same time, what kind of research went specifically into, Begum Hazrat Mahal? Because this is 1857, 58 we are talking about. So
Yes.
how did you collect the data?
Yeah. Okay. So, as you know, Google and all is just going to give you very basic stuff, and
Yeah,
some of it is very contradictory also. Not
true.
everything matches up to what the other sites say. So it was just very, very basic that I took a little bit of information on the Google, and then after that, I have downloaded a lot of books of history by not only British historians but also Indian historians such as William Dalrymple, and then we have Shashi Tharoor. We've got some very,
Okay.
very learned people, academicians writing. And then there were some papers, academic papers again. A lot of information. In fact, there was so much that just processing all that information takes me about 6 to 8 months. And then what happens is, as I keep, reading, then I make my plot. Then I again go back and read. So it takes me about three readings of all my research information to get it into place in
Oh,
my head that this is what happens. But as you know, in history, we can't take liberties with dates and events. So I do
yes.
make notes. I do take notes and I keep it open on my computer when I'm writing so that I don't make any mistakes about what happened when and what happened before what and after what. So these are things. And then I had downloaded a lot of very old maps of the 19th century, a
Mhm.
map of Lucknow at that period in time, a map of the two, there are two relief attempts by the British to take
Yes.
out their people to
Hmm.
evacuate their people from the
The
residency.
residents.
So both these had different routings, the whole strategies were different. So the map that you would have seen in the front of the
Hmm.
book is
Yes.
actually, we have created that map from a lot of information that we had. We have created that map ourselves to show the two routings, how they went into the residency
Yes.
from Kanpur. Yes. And then I had maps of the Kaiserbagh Palace,
Hmm.
how the monuments and the palaces within the complex were placed. So there was a lot of information, as I said, and then information on Hazrat Mahal herself was not enough. So I had to build from it. I just had some very basic information, how she fought, how she got the rebel armies together, and how she strategized her battles, how she placed her son on the throne and crowned him as the 11th Nawab in spite of all the resistance from the British. So all these things that she has done, I have read about it, but I have added meat to the
Yes.
basic skeleton of it.
Yeah, it sounds like, not just like so much effort, long, tedious journey that you started. But how did you, after writing about so many other women also, how did you narrow down on picking up Begum Hazrat Mahal?
Yeah. See, what happens is when I travel, I go and visit, historical monuments. We, as a family, we do that. We visit a lot of places in India where there's historical interest. So when I go and see these places, and we have a guide who tells us about these monuments and the history behind it, then I pick up some stories there. So this time, what happened was with Lucknow, how it happened the other way around. I didn't start with Begum Hazrat Mahal. I came to her in a different kind of a route. When we went to see the residency, I don't know if you've been to Lucknow.
No, I
There is
haven't.
this residency over there which is still intact. All the
Oh,
quite a few of the buildings are there. Not all the houses, but some of the important buildings are there. They've been kept as museums and treasuries. The old treasury and the residency building are all still there. So, and then Dr. Ferrer's house is still there, very
oh,
much there. You can walk inside, see the dining room, the very area in front of the fireplace where Sir Lawrence had died. Henry
yeah,
Lawrence had
yeah,
died. So
yes.
that place is also there still. So all these things, when I went and saw, what struck me most about it was that there were bullet marks on all the exteriors of these buildings in the residency. solid, sort of, it's been bombarded with bullets. You can see that. So then that sort of set me thinking that, people here have gone through so much of trauma and stress, and how did they live in those times? I mean, it was held to siege by the rebels for about 148 days total.
Yeah.
How did the people inside live? How did they last? How did they eat? And how did they survive? So all these things were in my mind. So when I came back home and I did a lot of research on it, I realized that I had to write it from the other side also. The main thing is the first war of independence. That is the important thing for us, that sort of set the ball rolling for our
Yeah.
freedom movement. So when I came back, I read up and I realized that Hazrat Mahal had led her rebel
Yeah.
forces so beautifully. She had got them together and done this. That is how I came to choose her as my protagonist.
Very true. One of my biggest finding, apart from there are several nuances which I wrote from your book, but then one of my biggest findings was that this was the start point. So this rebellion led by, Hazrat Mahal was the start point of first war of independence for India.
Absolutely correct.
And the way you were describing the residency and the Kasabagh Palace in Lucknow, it's so vivid that I can totally picture in my mind that okay, this was happening. There was a lot of firing and the kind of struggle, the rebels were putting it. So
Yeah.
the storyteller, the way you narrate, everything just comes alive. I am highly recommended to everybody who has met me last 1 week per se. Okay, read this book. This is
Thank
something
you.
we don't even know. I can stop. I can I cannot stop on this. At the same time, ma'am, uh, did you find anything really astonishing? Something that was not even you were not expecting while researching for the book, because you said that you have been to Lucknow. So anything of that sort that it
Yes,
blew
yes,
out?
there is. There was. What happened is when I started researching Begum Hazrat Mahal, I realized that she was totally a contemporary of Rani of Jhansi. It was
Oh,
not that they were in different time periods. They were absolutely the same 1857, 58. And yet we know so much about the Rani of Jhansi and we don't know enough
yeah,
about Hazrat Mahal. So that surprised me. And I said, why is this? And I realized that though the Rani of Jhansi had fought as fiercely and as Hazrat Mahal, but Hazrat had done so much more. She had got a multitude of people from all cross sections of society to come and fight under her leadership. And that is not a small feat because you had Muslims, you had Hindus, you had
yeah,
higher caste Hindus, you had Dalits, you had every kind. You had the rich merchants and the landlords, you had the poor farmers, you had every kind of person from every cross section of society who came together under her. And when she set up this army, the rebel army, and she asked people she asked who can help me out with whatever funds you have, and she first puts out her jewelry and she contributes her jewelry and whatever money she
yes,
has, and she lives a very simple ascetic life after the Nawab has left. As you know, she lives in a small little house called the Cholaki Koti, which was once
right,
owned by the royal barber. So she lives in that house with just two servants. And then when she asks everybody to contribute, they all contribute so much and they all come together and they put up such a beautiful fight. This was the huge surprising thing for me that, she could do this. And though Rani of Jhansi is so famous, I think Begum Hazrat Mahal has achieved much more than her. Though she
yeah,
didn't die in action as the Rani of Jhansi did, she
hmm,
did die many years, about 19, 20 years later in Nepal. But the
hmm,
point is that, she has done such a wonderful thing of kick-starting the revolution
yes,
in India.
very true. And holding it, when I was reading initially, as I wasn't aware, like what you said, that I have read a lot about Jhansi Rani, but not anything about Hazrat Mahal. So I was trying to understand what I'm getting into. And then I realized, okay, what she has done, from where she has started, her background, from where she came from, Mohammadi to be very specific, it was a leap of faith that she could go so far. Initially, my perception about that was that, someday she's going to go back, because
Hmm.
the story, the story keeps you
Yeah.
thinking, okay, I could predict this better. Like the kind of thought you have when you read, but then every chapter you just surpassed what I thought as a reader. Okay, I was like, next, oh my God, this I haven't thought of, or this I haven't anticipated. So that was amazing. But ma'am, there is something, see, I enjoy historical fiction. I feel that it enhances me as a person. It makes me more aware of my culture. But when I see, when I see the current generation, they are not that much into history or, historical
True.
fiction as a genre. But why you chose historical fiction as a main subject line for last couple of novels of yours?
In fact, the reason is exactly what you just said, that today people are not interested in India's past. They're not bothered about the history. And what we don't realize as a people is that what we are today is what we have come from. That
Mm.
is the distilled, what is today, what is our life, is the distilled life of what has come down from that time, of people's sacrifices, their fights, their freedom, their fight for freedom. Everything they did is what has given us today. So we need to talk about it. We need to embrace it as our past and to enjoy the fact that we have such a rich and beautiful history, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that is the reason I started writing. But then what happens is, unlike in history books, where people get bored in the first two paras, I can tell you very honestly, I'll make a confession, I was not very fond of history in school. So what made
Oh,
me interested in history? It's because when you travel to these places and you discover there are human stories below the historic, larger narratives of history, there are so many human stories, then you realize that, there is a human face to history. And I started exploring the human face. As you know, in Mandu, which
yes.
is the story of Baz Bahadur and Sultan Baz Bahadur and Rukmati.
Yeah.
And then in Kuldhara, which is another historical fiction. So in all of them, when you give a human, you talk about the human suffering, the human experience, it suddenly transports you into that world. And then you can reimagine and relive that life with them. And then history becomes a very sweet pill to swallow. So when we need to, this is one way of getting people to read history and to know our past.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued about, you mentioning residency, that the bullet marks still being there, Castlebar
Mm.
Palace being restored. And uh, but at the same time, one question kept, lingering in my mind that, see, if I talk about 1857 typically, so then the Nawab has left, okay, and the
Yeah.
Begum is still back and has a very young son, Birgis, yeah. And still, the locals or the merchants or the highs and the lows have supported her.
Mm.
So, what do you think? Like, what was the reason that, or what was the resentment that the local population supported Begum Hazrat Mahal?
Yes, very good question. There are many reasons. First is, the most obvious one is
Mm.
that she was a very powerful personality. She was already a royal persona. She had a royal
Yeah,
persona. Though the Nawab had left, he had been exiled, and even before he was exiled, he had divorced her. He had actually
yeah,
formally divorced her, saying that I don't want you, because she was not at all keen that he leave everything and go just because the British said go. She wanted him to stay back and fight, but he didn't do it. He just took their money and whatever the compensation they gave him, and he left with his full court. At that point, she said, I will not go with him. So that was the starting point. Sorry,
mm.
what was the question? I forgot.
Yeah, yeah. No, 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 it's
Yeah, why did the
perfectly all
people
right.
support? Yeah,
Yeah,
why did the
locals,
people?
yes.
Yeah. So why did the people support her? Is because, firstly, as I said, she was a royal persona and she had this powerful personality. But besides that, there were land laws the British had brought in, which was affecting the poor farmers. There were land laws which were affecting even the rich farmers. Then the merchants, they were badly burdened by the tax laws of the British, because now the British was putting pressure at every slab of society. They were putting pressure. Then the cloth weavers, they were losing their business. In fact, it was a total deindustrialization of the cloth industry, of the cotton industry, because everything was being shipped away to England, and there it was being machine made as fabrics and coming back to be sold back to us. So the same cotton would go and come back to us. So everybody was losing their jobs. People were not happy with the whole, firstly the annexation of Awadh, and then the exile of the Nawab, and then the land laws and the tax laws and all those things. So these were the various things, and most important for Hazrat Mahal, one of the most important things for her was the conversions that the British were doing.
Yes.
They were forcibly converting people. All the time there were conversions going on. As you saw in the book, there was a group of women in every slab of society, British society, who were just doing these conversions of their domestic staff. So it started like that. And then the convents, all the convent schools were giving English education, but they were also converting people very quickly. So these conversions of Muslims and Hindus to Christianity was the last, the straw that broke the camel's back, because Hazrat was furious about this.
Very true, when you said that, you've forgotten the question in the between. I could sense that, you have so much to offer when it comes to Begum Hazrat Mahal, that shortlisting what point to come is, yeah, it's a task, because when I was writing, questions was like 1, 2, 7, 8. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to take forever for me to, like let my curiosity seep in. So I certainly understand that. At the same time, ma'am, when I talk about Begum Hazrat Mahal, what do you think, if she would have made one decision that would have changed the way the entire story ended? This is something, really was speaking to you, and I just felt that when you were writing, you must have thought of, okay, ये नहीं किया होता ना तो story कुछ अलग हो जाती. ऐसा कुछ आपने सोचा था, ma'am?
Actually, socha tha, but knowing her personality, she could have never ever knuckled down to the British. She could have never done that, because for her that would mean, as I said, living by the Queen's decrees. All the time it would be whatever the Queen said would go. The Queen Victoria was the Queen at that time, and whatever her decrees were is what people would live by. And she didn't want to do that. And she said this would mean that I would be living in a Hindustan which is not mine anymore. It belongs to the British. It belongs to the stepmother. So it was a very hard decision for her to say that I will go away. I don't want to give away the ending at this point, but the decision she took was not easy for her, but it was the lesser of the two evils. I'll put it that way. It was the lesser of the two evils that she was confronted with. So she took the lesser of them. She said, okay, at least this way, I live life on my terms and not on their terms. So there again, her feminism comes in.
Yeah, putting, everybody's perspective before just realizing, what she thinks. I must say to every Indian out there, we have known about a lot of history behind India, but then this was a game changer for me. This was something that truly added value to my knowledge about Indian history, the culture, what I look towards the British rule, and particularly the India during 1880s and that particular era. Ma'am, before I just see, I cannot ignore that. I see a lot of books behind you. So, if you don't mind, can you just share a couple of recommendations for our book club, or a couple of your favorite books?
See, I always love literary fiction which has a story of human struggles. And these are those huge human struggles that people have gone to. I would highly recommend John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. I am so, sort of floored by that book. I have read it long back and I've reread it again some years back. And I think that's it's a literary fiction. It is a very lengthy one, but it is stupendous. It is just beautiful. And from beginning to end, you see the struggles of one family. This is like Pearl S. Buck's Good Earth. Good Earth again is the struggles of one family which leaves their rural, rural life and comes to the city and struggles. So these are stories which are human struggles and how people overcome those struggles. So I would recommend these. And then we have The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. So I'm only recommending to you literary fiction, which has got the story of human experiences and human struggles, because at the end of the book, you come out feeling richer in your experiences because of what you've read. So these are three books I would definitely recommend. And there are any number of books out there, and if you want me to recommend something which is more action oriented, well, I would say the River of Smoke by Amitav Ghosh. I love that
Okay.
book again. It's a very long story again, but it's full of, there's so much happening, and there's a culture of the Chinese, and there's all these people who go and live on the banks of the river, and they do their business over there. This is the Pearl River
Yes.
which enters China.
Hmm.
So that I love that book too. So these are few things that I would recommend.
Wow.
I don't know the taste
This.
of your book clubs, but I don't know what taste they do have. But this would be, on a lighter note, it's always P.G. Woodhouse for me, Marion Keyes, Richard Gordon. These would be my light reading, but heavier reading would be these enriching
Definitely,
experiences.
yes. On a very serious note, there are people who will read classic historical fictions, like one you said, literary fictions. Then there are people who will read only thrillers and murder mysteries, and then there are people like me who would read historical fiction by the end of the day, but then start their day with Ernest Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea and books like that. So it is,
Yes,
according to me, it's depends upon like really in kind of mood you are into.
it,
That is the time of the day
that's
I'm
true.
at.
That's actually very
Uh,
true. It all depends on our mood also.
Very true. At the same time, ma'am, it has been an enriching experience listening to you, reading the book and being part of Hazrat Mahal's journey through your eyes. And I must say, I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I can't recommend this book enough. I'm sure
Thank
lot of
you.
us have already, spoken about what we are going to pick next. I'm going to start one soon, and a lot of them who have already read Mount, we're going to start with Begum Hazrat Mahal. Thank you so much, ma'am, for accepting our invite and sharing
Thank
your writing journey with
you.
Kitabeclub.
This was such a nice chat. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, ma'am.
All the best.
Yeah,
Bye
thank you so much. Bye bye.
bye. Bye.